"Excuse me, you're in my seat." The words cut through the hushed atmosphere of first class like a blade through silk. Marcus Rivera looked up from his legal brief, his dark eyes meeting the piercing blue gaze of a woman who clearly expected immediate compliance. At 32, Marcus possessed the kind of quiet confidence that came from years of facing down federal judges and corporate executives in courtrooms across the country. He wore a charcoal cashmere hoodie that looked deceptively casual, but cost more than most people's monthly rent paired with dark designer jeans and pristine white sneakers. The only hint of his true status was the limited edition Patek Philippe watch discreetly hidden beneath his sleeve. "I believe there's been a mistake," Marcus replied evenly, his deep voice carrying a slight accent that spoke of Miami's diverse neighborhoods. He held up his boarding pass without standing. "Seat 2A. That's what my ticket says." The woman standing over him was Victoria Sterling, though Marcus didn't know her name yet. At 29, she was undeniably stunning in the way that money could perfect. Platinum blonde hair pulled back in a flawless chignon, wearing a form-fitting navy business suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her Hermes bag dangled from one manicured hand while her other gripped an iPhone in a gold case. Everything about her screamed wealth privilege and the expectation that the world would bend to her will. "I don't care what your ticket says," Victoria replied, her voice carrying the particular brand of authority that comes from never being told no. "I always sit in 2A. Always. There's been some kind of mix-up. The first-class cabin of Atlantic Airways Flight 847 had been a sanctuary of peace just moments before. The Boeing 767 sat at Gate A15 of Miami International Airport on this Tuesday morning, its engines humming softly as the final passengers boarded. The air smelled of leather seats and the faint scent of the premium coffee being prepared in the galley. Marcus had been looking forward to the 3-hour flight to Boston, where he had a critical deposition the next morning. He flew this route every week, knew most of the crew by name, and always requested the same seat for its legroom and proximity to the exit. Sophia Martinez, the lead flight attendant, had greeted him warmly when he boarded 20 minutes earlier. At 27, she was professional and efficient with kind eyes that had seen enough entitled passengers to recognize trouble brewing. She approached the two passengers now with diplomatic caution. "Is there a problem here?" Sophia asked, her slight accent betraying her nervousness. Victoria whirled on her. "Yes, there's a problem. This man is in my seat. I specifically told my assistant to book 2A. I've been flying first class on this airline for 5 years, and I always sit in 2A. Always." Behind Victoria stood her assistant, Bradley Thompson, a nervous 24-year-old who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. He clutched an iPad and constantly checked his phone, his eyes darting between his boss and the growing audience of first-class passengers who were pretending not to watch the drama unfold. Ma'am Sophia began carefully. "I show that Mr. Rivera checked in 2 hours ago with a valid first-class ticket for seat 2A. Perhaps we can find you another excellent seat in first class." "Another seat?" Victoria's voice rose an octave. "Do you know who I am? I'm Victoria Sterling. Sterling Properties. We have corporate accounts with this airline worth hundreds of thousands of dollars a year." Marcus continued reading his brief, though he was listening to every word. In the 8 years since he'd graduated from Harvard Law, and the 5 since he'd made partner at Rivera, Martinez and Associates, he'd encountered enough entitled people to recognize the type. What Victoria didn't know was that his firm handled Atlantic Airways federal compliance and civil rights training. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Mr. Rivera," Sophia said, turning to him with pleading eyes, "would it be possible for you to consider?" "No," Marcus said quietly, not looking up from his documents. "I have a confirmed reservation for this seat. I'd prefer to keep it." The cabin went silent. Even the ambient noise of the air conditioning seemed to fade as the other passengers absorbed the tension. In seat 3, be Dr. James Patterson, A 45-year-old businessman returning from a medical conference discreetly pulled out his phone and began recording. He'd witnessed enough discrimination in his travels to recognize it when he saw it developing. Victoria's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the flush of anger creeping up her neck. "This is ridiculous. Bradley, call the captain. Call the CEO if you have to. I want this man moved immediately." Michael Anderson, the senior flight attendant, emerged from the galley where he'd been observing the situation. At 35, he'd been flying for 12 years and had seen every type of passenger conflict imaginable. But something about this situation made him deeply uncomfortable. The quiet confidence of the man in 2A, the escalating demands of the blonde woman, and the fact that other passengers were starting to take sides and pull out phones. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael announced in his practiced airline voice, "we'll be resolving this situation quickly so we can push back on time." But Marcus knew they wouldn't be pushing back on time. Not today. He reached for his phone, a movement that would change everything for everyone on board Flight 847. In Seat 1C, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a 38-year-old emergency room physician, watched the scene unfold with growing disgust. She'd flown enough to know discrimination when she saw it, and she wasn't going to stay silent. "This is wrong," Elena said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The man has a ticket. He's done nothing wrong." Victoria spun around. "Excuse me, did I ask for your opinion?" "Actually," Elena replied, standing up to her full height, "when you're discriminating against someone in public, it becomes everyone's business." The word discriminating hung in the air like smoke. Everyone knew what Elena was suggesting, and everyone knew she was right. The only question was whether anyone would have the courage to do something about it. That's when Marcus made his first call. Marcus's fingers moved steadily across his phone screen as Victoria continued her tirade. She'd now involved Bradley in a frantic search through her emails, trying to prove that her assistant had specifically requested Seat 2A when booking her ticket. "Show them," Victoria demanded, thrusting her phone toward Sophia. "Look at this email chain." February 15th, Bradley specifically wrote, "Please ensure Ms. Sterling is assigned Seat 2A as usual." It's right there in black and white. Sophia examined the phone with the patience of someone who'd dealt with countless passenger complaints. "Ma'am, I can see the email, but our system shows that Seat 2A was already assigned to Mr. Rivera when your booking was made. Your confirmed assignment is 4B, which is also a wonderful first-class seat with 4B. Victoria's voice cracked like a whip. "I don't sit in row 4. Ever. Row 4 is practically coach." "Bradley, how did you let this happen?" The young assistant's face went pale. "Ms. Sterling, I called 3 times to confirm your usual preferences, but they said 2A was already taken by another passenger. I tried to get you moved to 1A, but I don't want 1A. I want 2A. I've sat in 2A on this route 16 times in the past 2 years. The flight attendants know me. The captain knows me. This is my seat." Dr. Patterson in 3B continued recording, making sure to capture both the audio and video clearly. His medical training had taught him the importance of documentation, and his experience as a black professional had taught him to always have evidence when discrimination occurred. He adjusted his angle to get a better view of both participants. Marcus finished composing a text message and looked up calmly. "Ma'am, I understand you're frustrated, but I'm not moving. I have work to complete during this flight, and I specifically chose this seat for its amenities." "Work?" Victoria laughed, a sharp sound that echoed through the cabin. "What kind of work? Let me guess. You're flying to Boston for a job interview, maybe hoping to get lucky with an upgrade you can't actually afford." The racist undertones weren't lost on anyone. Elena Rodriguez stood up again, her medical training making her acutely aware of the stress responses she was observing in other passengers. "That's enough," Elena said firmly. "You don't know anything about this gentleman, and your assumptions are both inappropriate and offensive." Victoria turned her full attention to Elena, her blue eyes flashing with anger. "And you are Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Emergency Medicine, Jackson Memorial Hospital. And I'm telling you that your behavior is unacceptable." "Well," Dr. Victoria said, emphasizing the title with sarcasm, "maybe you should focus on your own business. This is between me and the airline staff." In seat 4, Amanda Foster, a 26-year-old social media influencer with 200,000 followers, had been discreetly live-streaming her travels when the confrontation began. Now she was broadcasting the entire scene to her growing audience, the viewer count climbing rapidly as word spread through her follower network. "Guys, you are not going to believe what's happening on my flight right now," Amanda whispered to her phone camera. "This woman is literally trying to kick a man out of his assigned seat because she thinks she's more important. The comments are going crazy. You all see this, right?" Her live stream had already attracted over 5,000 viewers, and the comments were flooding in faster than she could read them. Users were screen recording the stream and sharing it across other platforms. #Seat2. A was beginning to trend. Michael Anderson made his decision. He approached Marcus with the look of someone about to ask a favor he knew was unreasonable. "Sir, I wonder if I could have a word with you privately," Michael asked, gesturing toward the galley. "We can speak right here," Marcus replied without moving. "I have nothing to hide." "Mr. Rivera, isn't it?" Michael continued, consulting his passenger manifest. "I can see you're a frequent flyer with us, and we really appreciate your loyalty, Miss. Sterling here has some special circumstances, and I wonder if you might consider accepting an upgrade to our Premium Economy Plus section. It has extra legroom, and we could offer you a food voucher for—" "No," Marcus interrupted. "I paid full price for first class. I'm staying in first class." Victoria stepped closer, invading Marcus's personal space. "Look, I don't know what your deal is, but I'm trying to be reasonable here. Take the voucher, move to the back, and we can all get on with our lives. You're holding up an entire plane full of people." "I'm not holding up anything," Marcus replied evenly. "I'm sitting in my assigned seat, which I purchased and confirmed. You're the one creating a disturbance." "Disturbance?" Victoria's voice rose to a near shout. "I'll show you a disturbance. Bradley, get the captain. Get the CEO. Get whoever you need to get. I want this man removed from my seat immediately." The tension in the cabin had reached a breaking point. Other passengers were openly staring now, some recording, others whispering among themselves. A few looked uncomfortable with Victoria's behavior, while others seemed to be waiting to see how the airline staff would handle the situation. Jennifer Walsh, a 24-year-old junior flight attendant, watched from the back of the first-class cabin with growing horror. In her 2 years with the airline, she'd never seen a passenger behave so aggressively toward another passenger, especially over something as simple as a seat assignment. That's when Captain Robert Hayes emerged from the cockpit. At 52, Captain Hayes had been flying commercial aircraft for over 20 years. He'd seen passenger conflicts before, but the raised voices and obvious tension had reached the point where it was affecting the safety and security of his flight. His appearance in the cabin doorway commanded immediate attention. "What seems to be the problem here?" Captain Hayes asked in the authoritative voice that had commanded respect in cockpits around the world. Victoria immediately pivoted toward him. "Captain, thank goodness. I'm Victoria Sterling Properties. We have corporate accounts with Atlantic Airways. This man is in my seat and your crew is refusing to help me." Captain Hayes looked at Marcus, then back at Victoria. "Ma'am, can I see your boarding pass?" Victoria handed it over immediately. "As you can see, there's clearly been some mistake in the system." Captain Hayes examined the boarding pass, then consulted with Michael Anderson, who showed him the manifest on his tablet. The captain's expression grew increasingly serious as he realized what he was dealing with. "Ms. Sterling," Captain Hayes said carefully, "your boarding pass shows seat 4B. Mr. Rivera's pass shows seat 2A. There's no mistake in the system." "Then change it," Victoria demanded. "Override it." Do whatever you need to do. I've been flying this airline for years and I always sit in 2A. Always. That's when Marcus made his second phone call. This one would be different. Marcus's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen and saw it was his law partner, Carmen Martinez. He declined the call and instead opened his secure messaging app, the one reserved for legal emergencies and client crises. Typing on your phone isn't going to solve this problem, Victoria said, watching Marcus's thumbs move across the screen. The adults are talking. Actually, Marcus replied without looking up. I'm documenting everything for my legal team. Victoria laughed. Your legal team? What are you going to do? Sue the airline for giving you a seat upgrade, please. Dr. Patterson leaned forward in his seat. Ma'am, I'm recording this entire interaction. Would you like to reconsider your tone? Record away, Victoria shot back. I have nothing to hide. I'm simply trying to get the seat I rightfully deserve. Elena Rodriguez had heard enough. She stood up and addressed the flight attendants directly. This woman has made several inappropriate comments about Mr. Rivera based solely on his appearance. She's creating a hostile environment for other passengers. Why isn't anyone addressing that? Sofia Martinez looked desperately between the passengers and her senior crew member. In her years of flying, she'd been trained to de-escalate conflicts, but nothing in the manual covered what to do when the conflict involved potential discrimination and multiple passengers taking sides. Dr. Rodriguez Michael Anderson said carefully, "We're trying to resolve this situation as quickly and quietly as possible." Quietly, Elena's voice rose. She's been anything but quiet with her assumptions and demands. When someone's civil rights are being violated, quiet isn't the solution. Amanda Foster's live stream viewer count had climbed to over 15,000, and the comments were overwhelmingly supportive of Marcus. Screenshots of Victoria's behavior were being shared across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Hashtag Victoria Sterling was beginning to trend alongside hashtag Seat2A. Oh my God, guys, the comments are insane, Amanda whispered to her camera. Everyone is supporting the gentleman in the hoodie. Someone just said they looked up Sterling Properties and found their corporate contact information. This is getting real. Marcus finished typing his message and looked up at Captain Hayes. Captain, I have a question about Atlantic Airways' non-discrimination policy. Are you familiar with the federal regulations regarding passenger harassment based on race or ethnicity? The question hit the cockpit like a lightning strike. Captain Hayes had undergone mandatory training on exactly these issues, and he suddenly realized the legal minefield his aircraft had become. Sir, are you suggesting? Captain Hayes began. I'm not suggesting anything, Marcus interrupted calmly. I'm asking if you're familiar with the regulations, because this conversation is being recorded by multiple passengers and is currently being live-streamed to thousands of viewers. Victoria's face went white as she noticed Amanda's phone pointed in her direction, the live stream indicator clearly visible. Turn that camera off, Victoria demanded, marching toward Amanda. You have no right to film me without my consent. Actually, Dr. Patterson interjected, in a public space she has every right to record, and your behavior is now being witnessed by thousands of people. Bradley Thompson. Victoria's assistant tugged nervously on her sleeve. Ms. Sterling, maybe we should just take seat 4B. It's still first class, and shut up, Bradley. Victoria snapped, yanking her arm away. I'm not backing down from this. Jennifer Walsh, the junior flight attendant, approached Michael Anderson with obvious concern. Should I call ground security? She whispered. Not yet, Michael replied, but his confidence was clearly shaking. Marcus's phone buzzed with a response to his secure message. He read it quickly, then placed a call. When someone answered, he spoke clearly enough for everyone nearby to hear. This is Marcus Rivera. I need to activate emergency legal protocol for Atlantic Airways Flight 847. He paused, listening to the response. Yes, that's correct. Federal civil rights violation in progress, multiple witnesses and live documentation. The words federal civil rights violation echoed through the first-class cabin like a gunshot. Captain Hayes's training kicked in immediately. Any mention of federal violations required immediate attention and documentation. "Sir," Captain Hayes said, approaching Marcus directly. "Are you filing a formal complaint?" "That depends," Marcus replied, still holding his phone on how this situation is resolved. "But I want to be very clear. I am not moving from my assigned seat because another passenger doesn't think I belong here." Victoria's composure finally cracked. "I never said you didn't belong here. I said you were in my seat. You said people like me should know their place," Elena Rodriguez reminded her loudly. Everyone heard it. "That's not what I meant," Victoria protested, but the damage was done. Dr. Patterson stopped recording and immediately began uploading the video to his cloud storage. As a medical professional, he knew the importance of preserving evidence. "I've documented everything," he announced. "Every word, every gesture, every assumption." Amanda's live stream had exploded to over 25,000 viewers. The comments were moving so fast they were barely readable, but the sentiment was clear: overwhelming support for Marcus and complete condemnation of Victoria's behavior. "This has to be a record for my channel," Amanda whispered to her audience. "The hashtags are trending nationwide. Someone just said CNN is picking up the story." That's when Marcus made the call that would change everything. He dialed a number from memory, not his law firm, not his assistant, but a direct line he'd hoped never to use. When the call connected, he spoke with the calm authority of someone who held more cards than anyone realized. "Patricia. This is Marcus Rivera. I'm currently on Atlantic Airways Flight 847 at Miami International. I need to invoke Article 12 of our compliance agreement." He paused, listening to the shocked response on the other end. "Yes, that Article 12. Multiple federal violations in progress. Hostile environment created by crew's failure to address discrimination, and it's being broadcast live to 30,000 viewers." Captain Hayes went pale. He recognized the name Patricia Adams. She was Atlantic Airways' chief legal counsel, and if Marcus Rivera was calling her directly about Article 12, that meant... "Sir," Captain Hayes said urgently, "are you with Rivera Martinez, an associate senior partner?" Marcus confirmed, still on the phone with Patricia Adams. "And yes, Patricia, I'm recommending immediate grounding of this aircraft pending full legal review." The cabin went dead silent. Even Victoria stopped talking as the implications sank in. Marcus continued his call. "Crew has failed to address clear discrimination, passenger has made racial comments, and the hostile environment persists. Under our compliance agreement, I'm declaring this aircraft unsafe for operation." He listened for a moment. "Yes, do it now." He hung up and looked directly at Captain Hayes. "Captain, you have approximately 3 minutes before this aircraft's insurance is suspended and your flight clearance is revoked. I suggest you contact your operations center immediately." Victoria stared at him in disbelief. "You can't just ground a plane. That's not how airlines work." "Actually," Marcus replied, standing up for the first time since the confrontation began. "That's exactly how it works when the airline's legal counsel determines that federal regulations are being violated and the crew is failing to protect passenger civil rights." The revelation hit the cabin like a physical force. Marcus Rivera wasn't just another passenger. He was the lawyer who held Atlantic Airways' legal compliance in his hands. Captain Hayes was already reaching for the cockpit phone before Marcus finished speaking. In 20 years of flying, he'd never had a flight grounded for legal compliance issues, but his training was clear. When the airline's legal counsel invoked Article 12, everything stopped. Victoria stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Bradley Thompson dropped his iPad, the screen cracking against the cabin floor. The other passengers sat in stunned silence, processing what they'd just witnessed. "You're bluffing," Victoria finally managed. "You're just some guy trying to scare people with legal talk. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. His direct dial to Patricia Adams, Atlantic Airways' chief legal counsel, still active. Would you like to speak with her yourself? Before Victoria could respond, the cabin's intercom crackled to life. Captain Hayes' voice, tight with stress, filled the first-class section. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing a minor operational delay. Please remain in your seats while we resolve some administrative issues with ground control. Amanda Foster's live stream had exploded to over 40,000 viewers. The comments section was moving too fast to read, but she could see legal professionals identifying themselves and explaining the significance of what was happening. Guys, I think we just witnessed aviation history, Amanda whispered to her camera. A passenger just grounded an entire flight from his seat. The legal experts in the comments are going absolutely insane. Dr. Elena Rodriguez leaned forward in her seat. Mr. Rivera, how long have you been Atlantic Airways legal counsel? 5 years, Marcus replied, settling back into seat 2A. My firm handles their federal compliance, civil rights training, and discrimination protocols. Ironically, I personally designed the training program that should have prevented exactly this situation. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The very person being discriminated against was the one responsible for teaching the airline how to prevent discrimination. Sophia Martinez approached Marcus with obvious distress. Mr. Rivera, I'm so sorry. I had no idea who you were. We should have handled this completely differently. You should have handled it correctly regardless of who I was. Marcus replied gently, That's the entire point of civil rights law. It protects everyone equally. Victoria finally found her voice again. This is insane. You're going to ground an entire plane delay? Hundreds of passengers cost the airline thousands of dollars just because your feelings were hurt. No, Marcus corrected. I'm grounding the plane because federal law was violated, because crew failed to address discrimination, and because allowing this flight to proceed would expose Atlantic Airways to enormous legal liability. His phone rang. The caller ID showed Patricia Adams calling back. Marcus answered on speakerphone. Marcus, I've just spoken with operations. Insurance is being suspended in 90 seconds. Ground control has been notified. How bad is this? It's being live-streamed to 50,000 viewers, Patricia. The passenger made racial comments, demanded I be moved because I don't belong in first class, and physically grabbed me. Multiple witnesses, all documented. Jesus Christ. Patricia's voice came through clearly. Legal wants to know, are you filing federal charges? That depends on how this is resolved. Marcus replied, looking directly at Victoria. But the hostile environment needs to be addressed immediately. Victoria's phone started buzzing. She looked at the screen and saw her father's number. Richard Sterling, the founder of Sterling Properties, was calling. She knew the only reason he'd be calling during a business day was if something was very, very wrong. Daddy Victoria answered. Victoria, what the hell is happening? I'm getting calls from reporters asking about discriminatory behavior on an airplane. Please tell me this isn't you. Victoria's face went white as she realized the scope of what was happening. Her behavior wasn't just affecting her. It was about to destroy her family's business reputation. I was just trying to get my usual seat, she stammered. Your usual seat? Richard's voice was getting louder. You've just cost us our contract with Miami-Dade County. The mayor's office called 20 minutes ago. 20 minutes. They saw the live stream and are reevaluating their relationship with companies that don't share their values. Do you understand what you've done? The call was loud enough for everyone in first class to hear. Amanda's viewers were recording everything, and news outlets were beginning to pick up the story from social media. Dr. Patterson had uploaded his video to multiple news outlets and civil rights organizations. This needs to be seen by everyone, he announced. This is what discrimination looks like in 2024. Captain Hayes returned from the cockpit, his face grim. Mr. Rivera, I've just received confirmation from operations. Our flight clearance has been revoked pending legal review. All passengers will need to deplane. A collective groan went up from the passengers in economy who were only now learning that their flight was canceled. The gate agents were scrambling to make announcements and arrange rebooking. "This is your fault," Victoria said, pointing at Marcus. "All of this is your fault." "No," Elena Rodriguez interjected, standing up. "This is the consequence of your choices." Mr. Rivera was sitting quietly in his assigned seat. "You created this situation." Jennifer Walsh, the junior flight attendant, stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to gather your belongings. Security is waiting at the gate." "Security?" Victoria's voice cracked. "For what assault?" Marcus said calmly. "You grabbed my arm. It's on video, multiple angles." The full weight of her actions was finally sinking in. Victoria Sterling, who had started the day as a successful real estate executive, was about to be arrested on federal charges banned from the airline and had likely destroyed her family's business relationships. All because she couldn't accept that someone else was sitting in 2A. The atmosphere in first class had transformed from luxury travel to legal battlefield in less than 30 minutes. Captain Hayes stood at the front of the cabin, his uniform crisp, but his face showing the strain of a career-defining crisis unfolding in real time. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Hayes announced, "I need everyone to remain calm while we handle this situation. Mr. Rivera, could I speak with you privately?" "Captain, everything I have to say can be said publicly," Marcus replied, remaining seated. "Transparency is important in civil rights matters." Victoria clutched her phone, watching her world collapse through the comments on Amanda's live stream. The viewer count had climbed past 60,000, and major news outlets were beginning to report on the story. Her assistant Bradley stood frozen beside her, unsure whether to call lawyers, publicists, or start updating his resume. Sophia Martinez approached Marcus with visible remorse. "Mr. Rivera, on behalf of Atlantic Airways, I want to apologize for how this situation was handled." "We should have," Sophia Marcus interrupted gently. "I know you were put in an impossible position. This isn't about you personally. This is about training protocols and corporate accountability." Dr. Elena Rodriguez had positioned herself as an unofficial witness advocate, making sure every detail was being documented. "The medical term for what we just witnessed is hostile environment creation," she announced loudly. "It causes measurable psychological stress and violates federal workplace protection laws, which extend to transportation services." Amanda Foster was reading the flood of comments on her live stream to her audience. Guy's a Harvard law professor just joined the stream and is explaining that this could set precedent for passenger civil rights. Someone else says Atlantic Airways stock is already dropping in after-hours trading. The revelation of Marcus's identity had shifted the entire dynamic. Victoria was no longer the powerful customer demanding service. She was now a liability facing potential federal charges. The crew was no longer trying to appease her demands. They were in damage control mode. "Mr. Rivera," Captain Hayes said, consulting his phone. "I've been in contact with our CEO. Jonathan Mitchell would like to speak with you directly." Marcus considered this. "Put him on speakerphone. This conversation affects everyone on this aircraft." Captain Hayes dialed the number and activated the speaker function. Within seconds, the distinctive voice of Atlantic Airways' CEO filled the cabin. "Marcus, this is Jonathan. I just got off the phone with Patricia. Tell me this isn't as bad as it sounds." "Jonathan, I'm sitting in first class, surrounded by witnesses and live streaming cameras. A passenger demanded I be removed from my paid seat, made racial comments, physically grabbed me, and your crew initially tried to accommodate her demands rather than address the discrimination. It's exactly as bad as it sounds." "Jesus." Jonathan Mitchell's voice cracked slightly. "What do you need from me?" "I need immediate policy implementation. I need crew retraining. I need a public statement acknowledging that this happened and outlining how you're going to prevent it from happening again. And I need the passenger who created this situation banned from your airline." Victoria stepped forward desperately. "Wait, you can't ban me. I didn't do anything wrong. I just wanted my seat." Ma'am Mitchell's voice came through the speaker. "You're no longer a customer of Atlantic Airways. Your ban is effective immediately." The finality of those words hit Victoria like a physical blow. In 30 minutes, she'd gone from VIP customer to banned passenger, and the consequences were still cascading. Dr. Patterson had been quietly documenting everything on his phone. "I've sent the full video to the NAACP, the ACLU, and the Southern Poverty Law Center," he announced. "They need to see how discrimination plays out in real time." Bradley Thompson finally spoke up. "Ms. Sterling, I think we need to call your father's legal team." "My father's legal team?" Victoria laughed hysterically. "His company just lost a municipal contract because of me. I don't think he's going to be paying for my lawyers." The human cost of her actions was becoming clear. Sterling Properties employed over 200 people, and Victoria's behavior was threatening their livelihoods. Her personal discrimination was becoming a corporate crisis. Jennifer Walsh, who had been watching from the back of first class, stepped forward. "Mr. Rivera, I want to apologize, too. I could see what was happening, and I should have spoken up sooner." Jennifer Marcus replied, "You're not responsible for fixing a broken protocol, but this is exactly why we need better training and clearer policies. When discrimination happens, every crew member should know how to respond immediately." Amanda's live stream had become a phenomenon. Legal experts, civil rights activists, and aviation professionals were joining the comments section, providing real-time analysis of the unfolding situation. Hashtag Seat2A and hashtag Victoria Sterling were now trending across multiple platforms. "The engagement on this stream is breaking records," Amanda whispered to her camera. "We've got civil rights lawyers, airline executives, and federal transportation officials all watching this happen live. This is bigger than just a seat dispute now." Michael Anderson, who had been largely silent since Captain Hayes arrived, finally spoke. "Mr. Rivera, I need to take responsibility for my part in this. I should have immediately shut down any suggestion that you move from your assigned seat. I failed in my duty to protect all passengers equally." "Michael, I appreciate that acknowledgement," Marcus replied. "The good news is that this can be a learning moment. Real change comes from honest recognition of mistakes and commitment to doing better." Victoria's phone rang again. This time it was her attorney, David Chen. She stepped away to take the call, but in the confined space of first class, everyone could hear her side of the conversation. "David, I need help. I'm about to be arrested at the airport." "No, I didn't hit anyone. I just grabbed his arm." "What do you mean federal charges?" "It was just a seat dispute. How was I supposed to know he was a lawyer?" "Doctor?" Elena Rodriguez shook her head in disgust. Even now she doesn't understand that it wouldn't matter if he was a lawyer or not. Civil rights apply to everyone. The gate area outside the aircraft was becoming chaotic. News crews were arriving. Airport security was establishing a perimeter, and other passengers were demanding answers about their canceled flight. The ripple effects of Victoria's actions were spreading far beyond first class. Marcus checked his watch and made another call. "Carmen, it's Marcus. I need you to activate our crisis response team." "Yes, for Atlantic Airways." "No, I'm the victim, not the airline, but we need to manage this carefully. The entire incident is being live-streamed." His law partner's voice was clear enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Marcus, every major news network is calling. Do you want to give a statement?" "Not yet. But prepare one. Focus on the importance of civil rights enforcement and corporate accountability. This isn't about me personally. It's about making sure this doesn't happen to the next person." The call ended and Marcus looked around the cabin at the faces watching him. "I want everyone to understand something. This isn't revenge. This isn't about punishing one person. This is about creating change that protects everyone who travels." Victoria hung up her phone and turned back to the group, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. "Mr. Rivera, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Can't we work something out?" Marcus studied her for a moment. "Ms. Sterling, the time for working something out was 30 minutes ago, when you could have simply accepted that I had a valid ticket for this seat. Instead, you chose to escalate to make assumptions about me based on how I looked, and to create a hostile environment for everyone on this aircraft." "I wasn't thinking clearly," Victoria pleaded. "I've been under a lot of stress at work. My father's been pushing me to close deals, and I snapped." "Stress doesn't justify discrimination," Elena Rodriguez interjected. "Millions of people deal with work pressure without treating others as less than human." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of airport police. 3 officers in uniform appeared at the aircraft door, led by Sergeant Maria Gonzalez, a veteran officer who specialized in aviation incidents. "I'm looking for Victoria Sterling," Sergeant Gonzalez announced. Victoria raised her hand shakily. "That's me. Ma'am, we need to speak with you about an assault complaint. Please gather your belongings and come with us." The reality of federal charges was finally sinking in. Victoria Sterling, who had started the day as a privileged executive, was being arrested in front of 70,000 live-stream viewers and multiple news cameras. As she gathered her designer handbag and followed the officers off the plane, she turned back one last time. "This isn't over, Mr. Rivera. My family has resources." Marcus remained seated, his voice calm but firm. "Ms. Sterling, your resources won't change federal law. And they won't change the fact that what happened here today was recorded and witnessed by thousands of people." The aircraft door closed behind Victoria Sterling, but her actions would reverberate through the aviation industry, corporate America, and civil rights law for years to come. With Victoria Sterling escorted off the aircraft, the true scope of the situation began to unfold. Marcus Rivera remained in seat 2A, but he was no longer just a passenger. He was now the focal point of what would become a landmark case in aviation civil rights. Amanda Foster's live stream had reached 85,000 viewers, and major news outlets were beginning to broadcast portions of her footage. "I cannot believe what we just witnessed," she told her audience. "A passenger was literally arrested for discrimination on a commercial flight, and it's all because she tried to kick the wrong person out of their seat." Captain Hayes returned from another consultation with ground control. "Mr. Rivera, I've been instructed to ask what you need to resolve this situation and get our other passengers rebooked." "What I need," Marcus replied, "is assurance that this never happens again, not just on Atlantic Airways, but across the entire industry." Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been documenting everything from her medical perspective. From a psychological standpoint, what we witnessed was textbook discriminatory behavior. Assumption of inferiority based on appearance, demand for accommodation of prejudice, and escalation when confronted with equality. Patricia Adams, still on speakerphone, addressed the cabin. "Marcus, I have the Secretary of Transportation's office on another line. They want to discuss immediate implementation of enhanced passenger protection protocols." The magnitude of what was happening began to sink in for the remaining passengers. This wasn't just a local incident. It was becoming federal policy discussion in real time. Dr. James Patterson had finished uploading his complete video documentation to multiple platforms. "I've been a frequent flyer for 15 years, and I've seen discrimination happen countless times. The difference today is that someone with the power to actually stop it was the target." Sophia Martinez approached Marcus with obvious emotion. "Mr. Rivera, I need to ask, have other passengers been treated the way Mrs. Sterling tried to treat you? Have we failed to protect people before?" Marcus paused before answering. "Sophia, in the 5 years I've been working with Atlantic Airways on compliance training, we've documented over 200 incidents of passenger discrimination. Most victims don't have the legal knowledge or resources to fight back. They just endure it." The number hit the cabin like a physical force. 200 incidents that the airline knew about documented by their own legal counsel, and yet the training and protocols had failed to prevent what happened today. Jennifer Walsh, the junior flight attendant, broke down in tears. 200 people. And we've been letting this happen. You haven't been letting it happen, Marcus corrected gently. The corporate structure has been failing to give you the tools and authority to stop it. That's what's going to change. Michael Anderson stepped forward. Mr. Rivera, what would those tools look like? How do we make sure crew members can shut down discrimination immediately? Marcus pulled out his tablet and began outlining his thoughts. First, clear escalation protocols. Any suggestion that a passenger should move based on appearance or assumptions gets immediately elevated to the captain. Second, documentation requirements. Every incident gets logged and reviewed. Third, passenger Bill of Rights. Clear statement that discrimination will result in immediate removal and lifetime bans. Amanda's live stream comments were now dominated by aviation industry professionals and legal experts analyzing Marcus's proposals in real time. Guys, the legal community is calling this the Rivera Protocol, she reported to her audience. This could completely transform how airlines handle discrimination. Captain Hayes had been listening carefully. Mr. Rivera, if we implemented those protocols immediately, would you consider allowing us to resolve this internally rather than pursuing federal charges? Captain, this was never about punishment, Marcus replied. It was about protection. If Atlantic Airways commits to genuine change, monitored by independent auditors, and if Ms. Sterling faces appropriate legal consequences for her actions, then we can discuss resolution. His phone buzzed with a text from his law partner, Carmen Martinez, CNNA, BCNBC, and Fox, all requesting exclusive interviews. DOT Secretary wants to meet tomorrow. NOACP wants you to keynote their Aviation Equality Summit. Marcus showed the message to Captain Hayes. This story isn't going away. The question is whether Atlantic Airways wants to be remembered as the airline that enabled discrimination or the one that led the industry in eliminating it. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been consulting with colleagues via text throughout the incident. I've been in contact with the American Medical Association's Civil Rights Committee. They want to document this case as an example of how discrimination creates measurable psychological harm in public spaces. The academic and professional attention the incident was receiving added another layer of significance. This wasn't just a viral video. It was becoming a case study in civil rights enforcement. Patricia Adams's voice came through the speaker again. Marcus, I have updates from corporate. The board has called an emergency meeting for tonight. They want to discuss immediate policy changes, and they want your input on implementation. Tell them I'll participate remotely, Marcus replied. But I want transparency. If Atlantic Airways is serious about change, these discussions need to be public. No more closed-door policies that fail to protect passengers. Sophia Martinez was still processing the scope of systemic discrimination Marcus had described. Mr. Rivera, those 200 incidents you mentioned, do you have documentation on all of them? Everyone Marcus confirmed, names, dates, crew responses, outcomes. It's all in my files, and it will all be part of the federal review that's about to begin. The revelation that Atlantic Airways' own legal counsel had been documenting discrimination for years would become a major part of the story. The airline hadn't just failed to prevent discrimination. They had evidence it was happening and had failed to act decisively. Dr. Patterson stood up and addressed the cabin. I want everyone to understand what we witnessed today. This wasn't just about a seat. This was about human dignity. And the reason it ended differently than it usually does is because the victim had the power to demand justice. Amanda's viewer count had passed 100,000, and her stream was being broadcast live on several news networks. This is absolutely incredible, guys. We're watching civil rights history happen in real time. The hashtag Rivera Protocol is trending worldwide. Marcus received a call from his assistant back at the law firm. "Marcus, I have the Attorney General's office holding for you. They want to discuss federal civil rights prosecution." He declined the call for now. "Later. Right now I need to focus on making sure this leads to real change, not just punishment." Captain Hayes looked around the cabin at the faces of his crew and remaining passengers. "Mr. Rivera, I've been flying for 20 years and I've never seen anything like this. What you've done today, it's going to change everything, isn't it?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Captain, when federal law is enforced, when discrimination has real consequences, when people see that civil rights matter, yes, everything changes." The aircraft remained grounded, but the movement for aviation civil rights had taken flight. As news of the incident spread beyond Amanda's live stream, the passengers who had witnessed Victoria Sterling's behavior realized they were now part of aviation history. Dr. James Patterson took the lead in coordinating witness statements, understanding that documentation would be crucial for any legal proceedings. "Everyone who saw what happened needs to provide a statement," Dr. Patterson announced to the first-class cabin. "This kind of discrimination only stops when there are consequences, and consequences require evidence." Dr. Elena Rodriguez was already drafting her medical assessment. From a clinical perspective, Mr. Rivera showed remarkable composure under discriminatory stress. Ms. Sterling exhibited classic signs of entitlement psychology and racial bias confirmation. Sophia Martinez approached Marcus with a request that surprised everyone. "Mr. Rivera, I want to provide testimony too. I've seen passengers treated unfairly before, and I've been too afraid to speak up. After today, I can't stay silent anymore." The admission from a crew member carried enormous weight. Sophia was essentially confirming that discrimination was a known problem within the airline industry, witnessed by employees who felt powerless to stop it. Michael Anderson nodded in agreement. "I need to be honest too. We've all seen passengers make inappropriate comments or demands based on race or ethnicity. The protocols we had weren't strong enough to protect people." Jennifer Walsh, the junior flight attendant, was composing notes on her phone. "I'm documenting everything I observed. Ms. Sterling's behavior, the crew response, how other passengers reacted. All of it. Amanda Foster had transitioned from casual travel influencer to citizen journalist. My followers are demanding the full, unedited footage for legal purposes. I'm going to post everything. The entire confrontation, the legal discussion, the aftermath." Her live stream had become a phenomenon, with viewer counts exceeding 150,000 and engagement rates that were breaking social media records. Legal experts, civil rights activists, and aviation professionals were providing real-time commentary that was being recorded and archived. Captain Hayes made an announcement that would further document the significance of what had occurred. "I'm filing a formal incident report with the FAA documenting everything that happened on this aircraft. This will become part of the Federal Aviation Record." Marcus appreciated the captain's thoroughness. "Captain Hayes, that report will be crucial for establishing precedent. Other passengers who face discrimination will be able to point to this case and demand equal protection." Dr. Patterson had been coordinating with legal experts via text message. "I've been in contact with several civil rights attorneys who want to use this case as a class action foundation. They're saying this could open up litigation against multiple airlines for systemic discrimination." The potential for broader legal action added another dimension to the incident. Victoria Sterling's behavior wasn't just affecting her personally. It was exposing industry-wide problems that could result in massive legal liability for airlines across the country. Patricia Adams's voice came through the speakerphone again. "Marcus, I need to inform you that we're receiving calls from attorneys representing other passengers who claim they've experienced similar discrimination on Atlantic Airways flights. They want to join any legal action you might file." The revelation that other victims were already coming forward demonstrated the scope of the problem Marcus had been documenting for years. His position as Atlantic Airways legal counsel had given him unique insight into patterns of discrimination that were now being exposed to public scrutiny. Elena Rodriguez stood up and addressed everyone in the cabin. I want to read something I've written for my statement. As a physician and a Latina woman, I've experienced discrimination in professional settings. What I witnessed today was textbook prejudicial behavior. Assumptions based on appearance, demands for subordination, and escalation when equality was asserted. Mr. Rivera's calm response and legal knowledge protected not just himself, but established precedent that will protect future travelers. Her statement was immediately recorded by Amanda's stream and would be shared across legal and medical professional networks within hours. Sofia Martinez had finished composing her crew testimony. I'm submitting a formal statement to Atlantic Airways management and to federal authorities. I'm also requesting additional training for all crew members on civil rights recognition and response protocols. The crew's willingness to acknowledge systemic problems and request better training was unprecedented in the aviation industry. Usually, discrimination incidents were handled quietly to avoid liability. This case was creating transparency that would force industry-wide change. Marcus received a call from his law partner, Carmen Martinez. He answered on speaker so everyone could hear the update. Marcus, the story has gone international. BBC, Reuters, and Al Jazeera are all covering it. The Secretary of Transportation has scheduled a press conference for tomorrow specifically about airline discrimination. And the NAACP wants to present you with their Civil Rights Advocacy Award. The global attention meant that aviation discrimination was no longer a domestic issue. It was an international human rights concern that would affect travel policies worldwide. Dr. Patterson had compiled all the witness contact information. I have statements from 8 passengers, 3 crew members, and multiple recorded evidence files. This is the most documented case of airline discrimination in aviation history. Amanda Foster addressed her live stream audience directly. Guys, we just witnessed something that's going to change how airlines operate. The legal experts in the comments are saying this case will be taught in law schools and used in civil rights training for decades. Captain Hayes made one final announcement to the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, I want everyone to know that this incident will be used to improve our industry. What happened here today was wrong, but how we respond will determine whether it leads to meaningful change. Marcus looked around the cabin at the faces of the people who had become part of aviation civil rights history. Everyone who witnessed what happened today, everyone who spoke up, everyone who documented what they saw, you've made sure that discrimination has consequences. That's how we protect the next person who just wants to sit in their assigned seat. The witness testimony that emerged from Flight 847 would become the foundation for the most comprehensive aviation civil rights legislation in decades, proving that sometimes the most important flights are the ones that never leave the ground. While witnesses compiled their statements, the broader implications of Marcus Rivera's legal actions were cascading through multiple levels of authority. Patricia Adams, still connected via speakerphone, was coordinating with federal agencies in real time. Marcus, I have updates from 3 different government departments, Patricia announced. The Department of Transportation is launching an immediate investigation. The Department of Justice is reviewing for federal civil rights violations. And the FAA is conducting an emergency audit of our discrimination protocols. The speed of the federal response demonstrated how seriously the government was taking the incident. Amanda Foster's live stream had provided real-time evidence to federal authorities who were now able to act immediately rather than waiting for traditional complaint processes. Captain Hayes consulted his operations manual and made another announcement. Based on federal instruction, this aircraft will remain grounded until the investigation is complete. All passengers will be accommodated on alternative flights at no charge. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been monitoring social media reaction from the medical community. The American Medical Association has issued a statement supporting your case, Mr. Rivera. They're calling discrimination in transportation a public health issue that creates measurable psychological harm. The medical community's involvement added scientific weight to what many people dismissed as just hurt feelings. Discrimination had measurable documentable health effects that could now be used in legal proceedings. Sophia Martinez approached Marcus with information from the crew perspective. Mr. Rivera, I've been talking to flight attendants from other airlines. They're saying this incident has given them courage to report discrimination they've witnessed but were afraid to document before. The ripple effect was already reaching beyond Atlantic Airways. Crew members across the aviation industry were beginning to speak up about incidents they had previously kept silent, creating a wave of accountability that no airline could ignore. Michael Anderson had been in contact with the flight attendants union. Our union representative wants to meet with you, Mr. Rivera. They want to incorporate anti-discrimination protocols into our contract negotiations. The involvement of labor unions meant that civil rights protections would become part of employment agreements, giving crew members both the training and the contractual authority to stop discrimination immediately. Dr. Patterson received a call from his professional network. The American Medical Association wants to use my documentation of this incident in their diversity and inclusion training. They're saying that witnessing discrimination and failing to act makes medical professionals complicit. The medical community was recognizing that professional observers had ethical obligations to document and report discrimination, turning witnesses into advocates for civil rights. Amanda Foster's live stream had evolved into a real-time news broadcast with legal experts providing commentary and analysis. The constitutional law professor who just joined the stream is explaining how this case could strengthen federal civil rights enforcement across all transportation modes, not just airlines. The legal implications were expanding beyond aviation. If discrimination in transportation could be prosecuted federally with this level of evidence and witness testimony, it would affect buses, trains, cruise ships, and any other form of commercial transportation. Marcus received another call from the Attorney General's office. This time he answered it on speaker. Mr. Rivera, this is Assistant Attorney General Rebecca Williams. We want to discuss federal prosecution of this case as a test of enhanced civil rights enforcement in transportation. I'm willing to cooperate fully, Marcus replied, but I want to make sure this leads to policy changes, not just punishment for one individual. Understood. We're looking at this as an opportunity to establish legal precedent that will protect all travelers. Your cooperation would be invaluable. The federal government's commitment to using the case for broader civil rights enforcement meant that Victoria Sterling's actions would have consequences far beyond her personal situation. Captain Hayes had been monitoring communications between ground control and Atlantic Airways operations. Mr. Rivera. I'm being told that several other airlines are voluntarily grounding flights to review their own discrimination protocols. They don't want to be the next airline in the spotlight. The preemptive action by other airlines demonstrated how quickly the aviation industry was recognizing the need for change. No carrier wanted to face the legal and public relations disaster that Atlantic Airways was now managing. Patricia Adams provided another update. Marcus, our insurance company, is demanding immediate policy changes. They're saying discrimination liability could bankrupt airlines if federal enforcement becomes standard. The insurance industry's involvement meant that civil rights protection wasn't just morally right. It was financially necessary for airlines to remain operational. Sophia Martinez had been coordinating with other Atlantic Airways crew members. Mr. Rivera, flight attendants from our other routes are reporting discrimination incidents they witnessed in the past week alone. The crew wants to know how many incidents have been happening that we didn't report. Marcus consulted his files on his tablet. In the past month, I've received reports of 17 incidents of passenger discrimination on Atlantic Airways flights. Most victims didn't pursue complaints because they didn't believe anything would change. The number shocked everyone in the cabin. 17 incidents in 1 month from just one airline suggested that discrimination in aviation was far more common than the public realized. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was analyzing the data from her medical perspective. 17 incidents in 30 days means discrimination is a regular occurrence, not an exception. The psychological impact on affected communities must be enormous. Jennifer Walsh, who had been largely quiet, finally spoke up. If this is happening 17 times a month just on our airline, how many times is it happening across the entire industry? The question hung in the air like smoke. If Atlantic Airways, which had civil rights training and legal counsel, was experiencing this level of discrimination, the industry-wide problem was likely massive in scope. Amanda Foster addressed her audience, which had grown to over 200,000 viewers. The aviation industry is about to face a reckoning. This one incident has exposed patterns of discrimination that affect thousands of travelers every month. Marcus made one more call, this one to his law firm's research department. I need you to compile every discrimination complaint we've handled for every airline client in the past 5 years. Full statistical analysis. We're going to need comprehensive data for the federal investigation. The systematic documentation of aviation discrimination was about to become public record, exposing an industry-wide problem that could no longer be ignored or handled quietly. The system hadn't just broken down, it was being completely reconstructed from the ground up. The deplaning of Flight 847 marked the beginning of the most significant aviation civil rights case in decades. As passengers gathered their belongings, each one understood they had witnessed something that would be remembered long after their travel plans were forgotten. Marcus Rivera remained in Seat 2A until the last passenger had departed, not out of stubbornness, but out of respect for the moment. When he finally stood and collected his briefcase, the simple action felt historic. Mr. Rivera. Captain Hayes said as they prepared to leave the aircraft in 20 years of flying, "I've never seen anything like what happened today. You didn't just defend your right to that seat. You defended everyone's right to dignity in travel." Airport security had established a media perimeter around Gate A15, but news crews with telephoto lenses were capturing every moment. TMZ, CNN, Fox News, and local Miami stations all had reporters on scene interviewing passengers as they emerged from the jet bridge. Dr. James Patterson became an impromptu spokesman for the witnesses. "What we saw today was discrimination pure and simple," he told CNN's aviation correspondent. A woman demanded that a black man be removed from his seat based solely on her assumptions about who deserved to be in first class. The difference today was that her target had the legal knowledge and authority to fight back. Amanda Foster's live stream had reached 250,000 concurrent viewers, making it one of the most watched real-time discrimination incidents in social media history. She provided constant updates to her audience as the story developed. "Guys, I just found out that Victoria Sterling has been taken to federal detention rather than county jail. This isn't just assault charges. She's facing federal civil rights violations." The legal experts in the comments are saying she could face up to 10 years in prison. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had coordinated with colleagues at Jackson Memorial Hospital to provide psychological support for any passengers who needed it. "Witnessing discrimination creates trauma for everyone involved," she explained to reporters. "We want to make sure all the passengers have access to counseling if they need it." The medical community's immediate response highlighted the real psychological impact of discrimination, elevating it from a legal issue to a public health concern. Sophia Martinez and the other crew members were being debriefed by Atlantic Airways management, but she made sure to speak to reporters first. "I want to be clear about something. Mr. Rivera showed incredible restraint and dignity throughout this entire situation. He never raised his voice, never threatened anyone, never behaved inappropriately. He simply refused to be treated as less than equal." Her testimony from a crew perspective was crucial for establishing the factual record of events. As a Latina flight attendant, her observations about discrimination carried additional weight with both the media and the legal system. Bradley Thompson, Victoria Sterling's former assistant, was seen leaving the airport with security escorts. He had been questioned by federal agents and was cooperating with the investigation. Sources close to the case indicated he was providing evidence about Sterling Properties' corporate culture and Victoria's history of discriminatory behavior. Meanwhile, Sterling Properties was in crisis mode. Richard Sterling had called an emergency board meeting, and the company's stock had dropped 8% in after-hours trading. Major clients were already calling to reevaluate their relationships with the company. Marcus Rivera's law firm, Rivera Martinez and Associates, issued a brief statement. Mr. Rivera is cooperating fully with federal authorities. This case represents an opportunity to strengthen civil rights protections for all travelers. We look forward to working with government agencies and the aviation industry to implement meaningful reforms. The measured response demonstrated Marcus's commitment to systemic change rather than personal vengeance. Legal experts noted that his restraint and focus on policy reform would strengthen his case and increase the likelihood of lasting change. Patricia Adams held an emergency press conference on behalf of Atlantic Airways. We deeply regret the incident that occurred on Flight 847 today. We are implementing immediate changes to our passenger protection protocols and will be working closely with federal authorities to ensure this never happens again. She announced several immediate actions: mandatory retraining for all crew members, new escalation procedures for discrimination complaints, and the establishment of a passenger civil rights ombudsman program. Marcus Rivera would serve as an advisor to ensure the changes were meaningful and effective. The Federal Aviation Administration issued a statement indicating they would conduct a comprehensive review of discrimination protocols across the entire aviation industry. The incident on Atlantic Airways Flight 847 has highlighted gaps in civil rights protection that require immediate attention industry-wide. The Department of Justice announced they would be filing federal charges against Victoria Sterling for civil rights violations, making this a test case for enhanced enforcement of transportation discrimination laws. As news of the arrests and federal charges spread, other passengers who had experienced discrimination began coming forward. The NAACP established a hotline specifically for aviation discrimination complaints, and within 6 hours they had received over 200 calls. This case has given people permission to speak up about experiences they thought didn't matter, explained NAACP Legal Director Teresa Johnson. Mr. Rivera's courage in standing up for his rights has created space for others to demand equal treatment. The American Civil Liberties Union announced they would be filing a class action lawsuit against multiple airlines using the documentation from Flight 847 as the foundation for broader civil rights enforcement in commercial aviation. Social media reaction was overwhelmingly supportive of Marcus Rivera, with hashtag Rivera Protocol trending worldwide and calls for industry-wide reforms dominating aviation-related discussions. The incident had become a catalyst for long-overdue conversations about equality in travel. Dr. Patterson's video documentation had been viewed over 5 million times across various platforms, making it one of the most watched civil rights incidents of the year. Legal scholars were already calling it the Brown versus Board of Commercial Aviation for its potential to transform industry practices. As the sun set over Miami International Airport Flight 847 remained grounded at Gate A-15, not as a symbol of disruption, but as a monument to the moment when one man's refusal to accept discrimination changed an entire industry. The immediate aftermath was just the beginning. The real work of transformation was about to begin. The federal courthouse in Miami became the epicenter of what legal scholars were already calling the most significant aviation civil rights case since the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Victoria Sterling's arraignment drew protesters, supporters, and media from across the country, transforming a routine legal proceeding into a national moment of reckoning. United States District Judge Maria Hernandez presided over the initial hearing, bringing both legal expertise and personal understanding to the case. As a Latina jurist who had faced her own share of discrimination, she understood the broader implications of the charges being filed. Federal prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Chen, presented the government's case with methodical precision. Your Honor, this case represents more than a single incident of discrimination. The defendant's actions, captured on video and witnessed by multiple passengers, demonstrate a clear violation of federal civil rights law in interstate transportation. Victoria Sterling entered the courtroom flanked by two expensive defense attorneys, but her appearance had changed dramatically from the confident executive who had boarded Flight 847. Her designer clothes were replaced by a standard detention jumpsuit, and her platinum hair hung limp and unkempt. Her lead attorney, David Morrison, from the prestigious firm Morrison, Blake and Associates, attempted to minimize the charges. "Your Honor, my client made some poor choices in a moment of travel stress, but this hardly rises to the level of federal civil rights violations. This was a seat dispute that got out of hand, nothing more." The statement drew audible gasps from the packed courtroom gallery where civil rights activists and discrimination survivors filled every seat. Judge Hernandez reviewed the evidence methodically. "Mr. Morrison, I have video evidence of your client making racially charged statements demanding the removal of a passenger based on appearance and physically grabbing that passenger when he refused to comply. The federal statute is quite clear about discrimination in interstate transportation." Marcus Rivera sat in the front row wearing a sharp navy suit that commanded respect without ostentation. His presence was calm but authoritative, and his legal expertise was evident in how he followed the proceedings with professional attention to detail. Assistant U.S. Attorney Chen continued presenting evidence. "Your Honor, we have testimony from 8 passengers, 3 crew members, and over 4 hours of video documentation from multiple angles. This is perhaps the most thoroughly documented case of transportation discrimination in legal history." The prosecution's evidence was overwhelming. Amanda Foster's live stream, Dr. Patterson's video documentation, and the witness statements from crew members created an unassailable factual record. Furthermore, Chen added, "We have evidence that the defendant's behavior was part of a pattern. Her former assistant has provided testimony about previous incidents where Ms. Sterling made discriminatory demands regarding service personnel and other customers. Bradley Thompson's cooperation with federal authorities had revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior. He testified that Victoria regularly made racist comments about hotel staff, restaurant workers, and anyone she perceived as service class. The Flight 847 incident was not an aberration. It was her normal behavior being recorded for the first time. Defense attorney Morrison attempted to introduce character witnesses, but their testimony backfired spectacularly. Several witnesses inadvertently confirmed that Victoria's sense of entitlement and discriminatory attitudes were well known among her social circle. "She's always been very particular about service," testified family friend Margaret Whitman, apparently unaware that she was confirming the prosecution's case about Victoria's discriminatory attitudes. Judge Hernandez set bail at $500,000 with conditions that included a ban on commercial air travel and mandatory attendance at diversity and sensitivity training. "Ms. Sterling, your actions on Flight 847 represent a serious violation of federal law and basic human dignity. These restrictions will remain in effect until trial." The bail amount and travel ban sent shockwaves through corporate America. For the first time, discrimination in commercial settings carried real, immediate consequences that affected the perpetrator's lifestyle and freedom. Outside the courthouse, Marcus Rivera addressed the media with the same calm authority he had shown in Seat 2A. "This case isn't about revenge against one person. It's about establishing that civil rights have meaning in every setting, including commercial aviation." His statement was carried live on all major networks and became the defining quote of the entire incident. Carmen Martinez Marcus's law partner announced that their firm would be filing a comprehensive civil lawsuit against multiple airlines based on the discrimination documentation they had compiled over 5 years. "The federal criminal case is just the beginning. We intend to use civil litigation to force industry-wide changes that protect all travelers." The civil suit would seek not monetary damages for Marcus personally, but court-ordered implementation of comprehensive anti-discrimination protocols across the aviation industry. Legal experts called it a brilliant strategy that prioritized systemic change over personal compensation. The Sterling Properties Board held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove Victoria from all corporate positions. Richard Sterling issued a public statement. "My daughter's behavior does not represent the values of our company. We are implementing comprehensive diversity and inclusion training for all employees." The corporate response demonstrated how discrimination liability now extended beyond individual consequences to affect entire companies and their employees. Dr. Elena Rodriguez testified before a congressional subcommittee on transportation discrimination, presenting medical evidence about the psychological impact of bias in commercial settings. Discrimination in transportation creates lasting trauma that affects victims' willingness to travel, work, and participate fully in society. Her testimony provided scientific backing for enhanced civil rights enforcement and helped build support for federal legislation strengthening passenger protection. The case attracted international attention when the European Union announced they would be reviewing their own aviation discrimination protocols. The thorough documentation of this incident provides a roadmap for strengthening civil rights protection in commercial aviation, globally announced EU Transportation Commissioner Andreas Mueller. Within 2 weeks of the incident, 17 other passengers had filed federal complaints about discrimination on various airlines using the Flight 847 documentation as a template for their own cases. The Rivera case had created a legal framework that empowered other victims to seek justice. The Federal Aviation Administration announced new mandatory reporting requirements for discrimination incidents, with airlines facing substantial fines for failing to document and address bias complaints. The rule change meant that incidents like Flight 847 could no longer be handled quietly or ignored. Victoria Sterling's trial date was set for 6 months later, but the impact of her actions was already reshaping American aviation. Her moment of entitlement on Flight 847 had triggered the most comprehensive civil rights reforms in transportation since the 1960s. The legal proceedings demonstrated that federal civil rights law had teeth when properly enforced, and that documentation and witness testimony could overcome even the most expensive legal defense. Justice wasn't just being served. It was being live-streamed, recorded, and used as a foundation for lasting change. The boardrooms of America's major airlines became crisis command centers in the days following Flight 847, as executives realized that their entire industry was now under federal scrutiny for discrimination practices. The immediate corporate response would determine whether airlines led the change or were forced into compliance through litigation and regulation. Atlantic Airways CEO Jonathan Mitchell called an emergency meeting of the Air Transport Association, the trade organization representing major U.S. carriers. "Gentlemen and ladies, what happened on Flight 847 isn't just Atlantic's problem anymore. The federal government is reviewing the entire industry, and passengers are filing discrimination complaints at an unprecedented rate." The meeting, normally a routine gathering of industry executives, had transformed into a strategic session on civil rights compliance. Representatives from Delta, American, United Southwest, and other major carriers attended virtually, their faces grim as they reviewed the legal and financial implications. Delta Airlines announced they would be implementing the Rivera Protocol, immediately establishing clear procedures for addressing passenger discrimination and mandatory training for all customer-facing employees. "We refuse to wait for federal mandate," declared Delta CEO Sarah Johnson. "This is the right thing to do." United Airlines went further, announcing they would hire an external civil rights organization to audit their operations and provide ongoing oversight of discrimination prevention. "We're committed to ensuring that what happened on Flight 847 never happens on a United aircraft," stated United CEO Michael Roberts. The competitive advantage of being perceived as civil rights leaders drove rapid adoption of enhanced protections across the industry. Airlines that had resisted diversity initiatives for decades suddenly became enthusiastic supporters of comprehensive anti-discrimination policies. American Airlines established a passenger ombudsman program allowing travelers to report discrimination directly to a civil rights advocate independent of airline management. Southwest Airlines announced they would be partnering with the NAACP to develop industry-leading bias prevention training. The speed of industry-wide adoption demonstrated that airlines had long been capable of implementing these protections. They simply hadn't been motivated to do so until facing federal enforcement and public scrutiny. Wall Street responded to the aviation industry's civil rights initiatives with surprising positivity. Financial analysts noted that proactive compliance would reduce legal liability and improve customer satisfaction metrics that drove stock performance. Companies that lead on civil rights tend to outperform those that resist change, explained Morgan Stanley aviation analyst Jennifer Webb. The airlines adopting the Rivera Protocol are likely to see improved customer loyalty and reduced legal exposure. The stock market's favorable reaction to civil rights compliance sent a clear message to corporate America: discrimination wasn't just morally wrong, it was financially foolish. Atlantic Airways' stock, which had dropped initially after the Flight 847 incident, rebounded strongly as the company announced comprehensive reforms. The appointment of Marcus Rivera as Chief Civil Rights Officer with authority to investigate and address discrimination across all company operations restored investor confidence. Mr. Rivera's leadership ensures that our civil rights commitments are genuine and effective, explained Atlantic Airways Board Chairman Robert Hayes. His experience with discrimination law and his personal understanding of bias make him uniquely qualified to guide our transformation. The irony wasn't lost on observers that the victim of discrimination had become the architect of industry-wide reform. Marcus's transition from passenger to policy leader demonstrated the power of turning personal experience into positive change. Sterling Properties faced a very different corporate reckoning. Major clients, including Miami-Dade County, the Port Authority, and 3 Fortune 500 companies, terminated contracts within days of Victoria's arrest. The company's revenue dropped by 35% in the first month alone. Richard Sterling was forced to mortgage his personal assets to keep the company operational. "My daughter's behavior has cost us everything we built over 30 years, he told the Miami Herald. But maybe that's what it takes to learn that success without character is worthless. The complete collapse of Sterling Properties served as a warning to other corporations about the real consequences of tolerating discriminatory behavior. Corporate culture and leadership accountability became board-level concerns across multiple industries. Insurance companies began requiring civil rights compliance audits as a condition of coverage for companies in customer-facing industries. Discrimination liability represents an existential threat to corporate clients, explained Aetna Business Insurance Director Thomas Chen. "We have to ensure our clients have effective prevention protocols." The insurance industry's involvement meant that civil rights compliance became a business necessity, rather than just a legal obligation. Companies that couldn't demonstrate effective discrimination prevention faced higher premiums or loss of coverage entirely. The National Association of Corporate Directors issued new guidelines requiring board-level oversight of civil rights compliance. Directors have fiduciary responsibility to protect shareholders from discrimination liability, the guidance stated. This requires active oversight, not passive compliance. Corporate governance experts noted that the Flight 847 case had elevated civil rights from an HR issue to a C-suite priority. Discrimination prevention was now considered as important as financial controls or cybersecurity for corporate risk management. The Harvard Business School announced they would be developing case studies based on the Flight 847 incident and its corporate aftermath. This case demonstrates how individual bias can create corporate liability and how proactive civil rights leadership can become competitive advantage, explained Professor Lisa Martinez. Business schools across the country began incorporating discrimination liability into their corporate strategy curricula, recognizing that future executives needed to understand both the moral and financial imperatives of civil rights compliance. The rapid corporate response to Flight 847 demonstrated that American business was capable of swift action on civil rights when properly motivated. The key was making discrimination too expensive to ignore and civil rights compliance too valuable to avoid. Within 6 months, the aviation industry had implemented more comprehensive civil rights protections than had been developed in the previous 50 years of operation. The transformation wasn't driven by altruism. It was driven by the recognition that discrimination was a business liability that no company could afford. The transformation of American aviation became evident to anyone paying attention to the subtle but significant changes in airports and aircraft across the country. At Miami International Airport, the same Terminal 3 where Flight 847 had been grounded now displayed prominent passenger Bill of Rights posters in English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole, ensuring that civil rights protections were clearly communicated to all travelers. Marcus Rivera walked through the same terminal where his life had changed 6 months earlier, but this time he wasn't just a passenger. He was returning from a congressional hearing where he had testified about the effectiveness of the aviation industry's civil rights reforms. Gate A15, where Flight 847 had been grounded, now bore a small plaque that few passengers noticed, in recognition of the courage required to demand equal treatment and the commitment to ensuring dignity in travel for all passengers. The Atlantic Airways crew working the gate that morning had all completed the new comprehensive bias prevention training that Marcus had helped design. Sophia Martinez, now promoted to crew supervisor for her courage in testifying about discrimination, greeted passengers with the confidence that came from knowing she had both the training and the authority to address any bias immediately. "Good morning, Mr. Rivera," Sophia said warmly. "Your usual seat 2A is ready, but honestly, you could sit anywhere on this aircraft and receive the same respect." The comment reflected the cultural shift that had occurred throughout the aviation industry. First class was no longer a sanctuary of privilege where assumptions about passenger worthiness went unchallenged. It was simply a seating section where all paying customers received equal treatment. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who was taking the same flight to Boston for a medical conference, stopped to chat with Marcus. "I've been tracking the medical literature on transportation discrimination since our incident. The number of published studies has tripled, and the American Medical Association has established transportation bias as a recognized public health issue. The medical community's embrace of transportation discrimination as a health concern had provided scientific validation for civil rights protections that went beyond legal compliance to address psychological well-being." Amanda Foster, the social media influencer whose live stream had brought global attention to the incident, was also on the same flight. Her career had transformed from travel content to civil rights advocacy, and she now worked with airlines to develop social media policies that promoted equality rather than just engagement. "Mr. Rivera, I wanted you to know that my Flight 847 documentation has been used in over 200 discrimination cases across the country. That live stream changed everything for victims of bias. They now know that their experiences matter and can be challenged," Amanda reported. The ripple effect of documented discrimination had empowered countless other victims to speak up and seek justice, proving that individual courage could create collective change. Captain Robert Hayes, who had been promoted to Atlantic Airways Director of Flight Operations, made a special point of greeting Marcus before the flight. "Mr. Rivera, I want you to know that the crew training you developed has been adopted by every major airline in North America and is being translated for international use. The global adoption of the Rivera Protocol had transformed aviation culture worldwide, proving that American civil rights leadership could influence international standards when properly implemented. Dr. James Patterson, the businessman whose video documentation had provided crucial evidence, had become an expert witness in discrimination cases across multiple industries. The legal precedent from Flight 847 has been cited in over 150 federal civil rights cases, he informed Marcus. Your refusal to move from that seat has protected thousands of people from discrimination. The legal impact extended far beyond aviation as courts used the Flight 847 documentation to strengthen civil rights enforcement in hotels, restaurants, retail establishments, and other commercial settings. The flight to Boston proceeded without incident, but the changes were evident in every interaction. Crew members made deliberate eye contact with all passengers, regardless of race or ethnicity. Service was provided with equal attention and respect throughout the cabin. The assumption that some passengers deserved better treatment than others had been systematically eliminated. Upon arrival in Boston, Marcus was met by federal transportation officials who provided an update on the broader impact of his case. Mr. Rivera, discrimination complaints in commercial aviation have decreased by 78% since the Rivera Protocol implementation. More importantly, passenger satisfaction surveys show that travelers from all backgrounds report feeling more comfortable and respected when flying. The statistical improvement demonstrated that civil rights protections benefited everyone, not just minorities who had previously faced discrimination. Victoria Sterling's trial had concluded 3 months earlier with a conviction on federal civil rights charges. She received 2 years in prison and was required to complete 500 hours of community service, specifically focused on civil rights education. Her conviction established legal precedent that discrimination in commercial transportation carried serious federal consequences. Sterling Properties had declared bankruptcy, unable to recover from the loss of major contracts following Victoria's arrest. The company's collapse served as a stark reminder to corporate America that individual discrimination could destroy entire organizations. Richard Sterling had used the bankruptcy proceedings to establish a civil rights education foundation, donating his remaining assets to fund bias prevention training in schools and businesses. My daughter's actions taught me that privilege without responsibility becomes prejudice, he explained to the foundation's board. The Sterling family's financial ruin and personal transformation demonstrated both the consequences of discrimination and the possibility of redemption through genuine commitment to change. Marcus's law firm, Rivera, Martinez and Associates, had expanded to become the nation's leading civil rights practice focused on commercial discrimination. They had successfully litigated cases against hotels, restaurants, retail chains, and transportation companies using the documentation techniques perfected in the Flight 847 case. We've proven that discrimination can be defeated when it's properly documented, legally challenged, and publicly exposed, explained Carmen Martinez at the firm's 6-month anniversary press conference. The key is turning individual incidents into systematic change. The firm's success had inspired law schools to develop specialized programs in commercial civil rights litigation, creating a new generation of attorneys equipped to challenge bias in all its forms. Federal legislation known as the Rivera Act was working its way through Congress, establishing national standards for civil rights protection in all forms of commercial transportation. The bill had bipartisan support and was expected to pass with overwhelming margins. This legislation will ensure that what happened on Flight 847 becomes impossible anywhere in American transportation, announced the bill's sponsor, Senator Maria Rodriguez. Mr. Rivera's courage has created legal protection for millions of travelers. The legislative response demonstrated that individual acts of courage could influence national policy when they resonated with universal principles of equality and justice. As Marcus reflected on the 6 months since Flight 847, he realized that his refusal to move from Seat 2A had accomplished something far greater than protecting his own civil rights. It had created a framework for protecting everyone's dignity in commercial settings. The transformation wasn't complete, but it was irreversible. American aviation had proven that entire industries could change quickly and comprehensively when discrimination became too expensive to tolerate and civil rights compliance became too valuable to ignore. 1 year after Flight 847, an unexpected letter arrived at Marcus Rivera's law office. The return address showed the Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury, Connecticut, where Victoria Sterling was serving her sentence for federal civil rights violations. The letter was handwritten on standard prison stationery, and Marcus read it with the same careful attention he gave to legal briefs. Mr. Rivera, I know I have no right to contact you, and I understand if you don't read this or respond. But I needed to tell you that prison has given me time to understand what I did and why I did it. For 29 years, I lived in a bubble where I never had to question my assumptions about other people. I was raised to believe that success meant getting what I wanted when I wanted it, regardless of how it affected others. I thought my family's money and status made me more important than everyone else. When you refused to give up your seat, I didn't see a fellow passenger with equal rights. I saw someone who was challenging what I thought was the natural order of things. I was wrong about everything. The other inmates here have taught me more about dignity and respect than I learned in my entire privileged life. Many of them grew up facing discrimination that I can't even imagine yet. They treat me with more humanity than I showed you that day. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know that forgiveness has to be earned, and I'm just beginning that process. But I wanted you to know that your courage in standing up to me probably saved me from a lifetime of ignorance and prejudice. I've been following the changes in the aviation industry and the other civil rights cases your firm has won. Knowing that my terrible behavior led to positive change for so many people is the only good thing to come from that day. When I'm released next year, I plan to dedicate my life to civil rights education. I want to help other privileged people recognize their biases before they hurt someone the way I hurt you. Thank you for not giving up your seat. Thank you for showing me that dignity isn't about where you sit. It's about how you treat other people. Respectfully, Victoria Sterling. Marcus read the letter twice before sharing it with his law partner, Carmen Martinez. What do you think, he asked. Is this genuine remorse or manipulation Carmen, who had decades of experience evaluating client sincerity, considered carefully? The language sounds authentic. Prison letters written for manipulation tend to focus more on the writer's suffering. This one acknowledges the harm she caused and takes responsibility for her choices. Marcus decided to respond, but his reply was brief and focused on the future rather than the past. Ms. Sterling, I appreciate your letter and your acknowledgement of the harm caused by discrimination. If you are genuine about dedicating your life to civil rights education, I would suggest contacting the Southern Poverty Law Center when you are released. They have programs that help former offenders contribute to bias prevention. Real redemption requires action, not just words. The communities you harm through your prejudice need advocates who understand the damage that discrimination causes. I wish you success in building a life based on equality and respect for others. M. Rivera. 6 months later, Marcus received a follow-up letter informing him that Victoria had completed a bachelor's degree in social work while in prison and had been accepted into a master's program in civil rights education. She had also established a scholarship fund for students studying discrimination prevention funded by the sale of her remaining personal assets. The transformation seemed genuine, but Marcus knew that true redemption would be measured by Victoria's actions after her release, not by her words while incarcerated. Meanwhile, other participants in the Flight 847 incident were building their own legacies from the experience. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had established a research program studying the psychological effects of discrimination in transportation settings, contributing vital scientific evidence to civil rights litigation. Sophia Martinez had become a national spokesperson for airline employee civil rights training, traveling across the country to share her experience and encourage other crew members to speak up against discrimination. Amanda Foster had transformed her social media platform into a civil rights advocacy tool using her experience with viral content to amplify stories of discrimination and justice across multiple industries. Dr. James Patterson had become expert witness in civil rights cases, using his experience documenting Flight 847 to help other victims preserve evidence of discrimination. Each person who had witnessed or participated in the events of Flight 847 had found ways to turn their experience into positive change, proving that individual courage could create ripple effects that lasted for years. The most significant personal transformation, however, belonged to Marcus Rivera himself. The quiet attorney who had simply wanted to read his legal brief in Seat 2A had become the nation's leading advocate for civil rights in commercial settings. "I never intended to become a civil rights icon," Marcus reflected in an interview with 60 Minutes. "I just refused to accept that someone else's prejudice should determine where I could sit. But sometimes individual acts of resistance create opportunities for collective progress." His law firm had grown from a mid-sized practice to a national powerhouse for civil rights litigation. The Rivera Protocol had been adopted internationally, and his refusal to move from Seat 2A had become a symbol of dignity and resistance that inspired people facing discrimination around the world. The personal redemption arc that emerged from Flight 847 demonstrated that even the most destructive acts of prejudice could become catalysts for positive change when confronted with courage, documented with precision, and transformed through legal action. Most importantly, it proved that redemption was possible for everyone involved. Victims who found their voices, witnesses who chose to speak up, and even perpetrators who genuinely committed to change. 2 years later, Marcus Rivera boards flights, knowing that his refusal to move from Seat 2A transformed aviation forever. The Rivera Protocol now protects millions of travelers worldwide. Victoria Sterling released from prison works with civil rights organizations to educate others about the true cost of prejudice. She learned that respect isn't demanded. It's earned through how we treat others when no one important is watching. Sometimes the most powerful change comes from the quietest resistance. Marcus didn't shout, didn't fight, didn't seek revenge. He simply refused to accept that someone else's bias should determine his worth. That refusal changed an industry and proved that dignity travels with every passenger who demands it. This story hits different because Marcus did something most of us wish we had the courage to do. He stood up to discrimination with calm authority instead of anger or submission. Victoria got exactly what she deserved, but more importantly, her actions exposed a problem that protected future travelers. The most satisfying part isn't her downfall. It's watching Marcus turn a moment of prejudice into a movement for justice. He could have taken a settlement and stayed quiet, but he chose to rebuild the entire framework. That's real power. Sometimes the person trying to push you down is actually pushing you toward your purpose. Victoria thought she was putting Marcus in his place. Instead, she put him in position to change the world. 3 takeaways. First, document everything. Discrimination dies in the light of evidence. Second, your response to injustice reveals your character more than the injustice itself. Third, real change happens when individual courage meets collective action. If you face discrimination, remember Marcus's example. Stay calm, know your rights, and refuse to accept less than equal treatment. Don't let someone else's ignorance make you smaller. And if you witness bias, speak up. Your voice might be the one that changes everything. To anyone who's ever been told they don't belong somewhere, you belong wherever you've earned the right to be. Stand firm. Document everything. And remember that sometimes the most important battles are won by simply refusing to move.